People always internalize you having a problem, but they don't actually see the depth of what you're talking about. Let's talk about just the men.
This is Fresh Perspectives, a show where we get new perspectives on the social issues that affect modern society. Our contributors will play a game where they pick out a statement. If they agree, they will walk to the agree side and state their reasons why. If they disagree, they will walk to the disagree side and state the reasons why. This is all in order to unify across the different perspectives.
Mental health skills don't come naturally to men.
You don't learn it, right? It happens to you in a way. I think it's from experiences though.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm neutral, because it depends on the experience you've had. Then that gives you maybe a few of the skills, or maybe none of the skills, or maybe 100% of the skills.
It's societal, because from where I came from in Africa, we brought that you have to be a man and you have to internalize stuff and but you can see some men, they have spoken, they will cry if they want to, and they can express their emotions. And I'm totally against when people tend to generalize stuff.
That's why I was so neutral on this, because I wouldn't even have talked about mental health when I was a kid. I was always just kind of given that space to, cry or express my way of being however I wanted to. But from my experience, it would be like, oh, don't complain or stop moaning, or just be like the little things like those maybe. But it wasn't overtly like, be a man, be this, be that, the other. I guess in some ways, yes, I kind of had that growing up as a kid, but not really, which is why I kind of go back to your point of how it's kind of different for everyone,
I do agree with that point, and particularly with Irish culture, it is that thing of suck it up, don't talk about it, just keep moving on with it. And knowing from my own professional experience, that builds up and up and up and up and up, and then that crashes. And then we don't quite have the coping skills, or we don't quite have the communication skills that are somewhat functional for us to be like, this thing has happened to me, I feel terrible about it, I need the support around me. And those are quite simple things once we wrap our heads around it.
I think everyone has different skills that they are very natural and personal to them. I think curiosity is a real part of mental health, and even if in delivering mental health services to other people. And definitely I've learned to kind of go back to that level of curiosity, because it's a real skill if to use in the right way. A taboo still exists for men when asking for help when struggling with their mental health.
From my experience, people always internalize you having a problem, but they don't actually see the depth of what you're talking about. It's just the surface. And then the funny thing with men is when you try to, because it gets to a point when we get to that point, right? We get, I don't want to say emotional, but we get very intense. And then people see it as, oh my God, take it easy. Like, why are you, why are you shouting? And you're like, just listen. And then it never gets understood. So
From an Irish perspective, when you hear the word mental health, what comes to mind?
New for me, because it's such a new term, I think, for a lot of, millennial Gen Z, because growing up, mental health just wasn't really a thing. Or when you heard mental health, you thought of like insane asylums or something like that, which is like, I know it's a bit of a reach, but that was kind of it growing up. But I think we're kind of learning as men to see past that now and ask for help and really address it with due diligence.
I suppose as well, from the Irish perspective, we have such a thing of like, we're going to do stuff for everybody else, but never for ourselves. I have trouble myself actually disclosing any time I'm, going through any negative mental health. But as soon as anyone else is going to disclose it, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there as a support. So it's this thing like, I won't help myself, but I'll help everybody else.
yes.
Definitely still showing vulnerability is an issue. Men look up to false role models and stuff like that. People that make a real success out of their life are typically some of the most fucked up people.
Yeah.
You know, women do a much better job being compassionate and circling kind of around each other. And I think men probably do a better job sometimes supporting women in that point of view as well.
Now it's much better, but I remember before it was hard for me to even open up to a girlfriend because, you know, most of them, they won't fully understand what I'm going through as a man, so they tend to like use it as a weakness. Or you're a man, you have to do this, you have to be strong and blah, blah. So I think it's just cultural and, you know, societal stigmatization and just that lack of, you know, education when it comes to mental health, that this is inevitable. We're human beings, you know, you have good and bad times, so this is how you manage it. And
Men face tougher societal expectations regarding mental health in contrast with other genders.
I know a few of my friends who are female, and they would have kind of been told stuff like you're being hysterical, or it's just mood problems, or it's hormone problems, and women would probably have a harder time because they'd have all of these labels attached to them by society already, especially the hysterical label. I know a friend who actually was on the phone to someone, and she said she was feeling suicidal, and the person on the other end actually just sighed. And I'm not saying probably that wouldn't happen to men, but it's definitely more prevalent that I've seen with my friends who are female that have been kind of pushed away or fobbed off, and it's kind of been classed as hysterics or whatever. And I don't think men experience that at all.
That answer is a little bit different perhaps than the question. Okay. Not that I disagree with what you said, but I think it's different to the question. I think there are a lot of pressures for men to perform and men to provide, like, even though, like, obviously women have, I wouldn't necessarily say equal rights, obviously there's still misogynistic issues that exist within society. But there's just different pressures, I think. I do think that, not that I think, I know, the health space, physical and mental, has been, in Western society, has been created by men and white men, white cisgender men, that's caused issues for women. And also, I know this is outside of gender, but when it comes to sexuality, like, there's much more mental health issues, suicides amongst queer, but also if we're specifically talking about genders, amongst the trans community, huge levels of suicide.
There are unique issues that but affect every gender group differently. So we are discussing, particularly with men's relationship with mental health, we're looking at how have men been socialized. We've obviously discussed so far about that competitive nature, about being able to internalize all these issues. So there are unique issues that we need to look at across that gender spectrum, rather than just honing in on, oh, it's just men that have it hard, if that makes sense.
Agreeing or disagreeing, we're not saying we don't understand or we don't see the issues from different genders. When we start to have discussions about, oh, why is this happening to men, or is this happening to men, whatever, it becomes a conversation about including everyone and including every gender and including, oh, when people feel this way, when people this way. But then we don't really say, let's talk about just the men.
I was looking at from someone who is from Africa. When you look at the responsibility, like hierarchy, men are expected to provide, to protect, and so I don't have responsibility not only to myself and my immediate family, but also extended family. And I find it very hard, to get used to it when I relocate to Ireland. I met someone and we went out for like lunch, and when it comes to like payment, and she was like, oh, we both pay 50-50. I was like, for real? Are you serious? So it's like, I was just, in my own subconscious mind, I was just thinking about back home. This is my responsibility. There's no need for you to like say 50-50. So I think it's that sort of cultural, pressure. We have to protect the kids, and you're a man, so you have to be strong. And
we could talk about this all evening.
Poor mental health amongst men is a factor in gender violence.
It's like, it's not that it's the be all and end all for sure, and it's like, it's not to say that it's an excuse or whatever for violence, but overall general negative behaviour, violence, addiction, depression, you name it.
You only need to look at the news as well, not even the news currently, but there's always a story about some poor woman that's being killed by her husband or a man, and you're just thinking like, why, you know?
Like we normally talk about, like there's this pyramid, we call it the pyramid of violence, where it starts with smaller acts. So it's little jokes, little quips, and then you kind of test the waters there. You move up and then you're doing acts of whatever it is, racism, xenophobia, misogyny, and then you keep going up until you get to the point of violence, murder and genocide. The vast majority of the actions that we see are in the bottom couple of rungs, but like where that violence can be seen is in that place where they're like, oh yeah, no, it's just a joke. But it is about being exposed to this argument for long enough where you start to dehumanize the other.
Let it fall, let it fall.
That was so beautiful.
Men create safe spaces to listen to each other. It's not different from other genders.
Like just recently, a couple of my friends and I started like telling each other like, okay, let's talk about that kind of, you know. And this only happened after we had like an event which we all did together. Okay. And then we realized, I can't remember how it happened, but it was just in between. We realized that we're all going through stuff.
So are you all comfortable in sharing?
Obviously not. Nobody is, but we're like, bro, I'm not comfortable with this, but
I think that's the essence. You have to like create a space that is both physically and mentally safe for you to have that sort of open conversation. Like it's about creating a space where us men, we have that sort of like physical safety as well as, and most importantly, that psychological safety, and that sort of openness in terms of expressing.
You actually said the physical and psychological aspects of it as well, because it is good to have like a safe contained space. It doesn't matter if it's the car, it doesn't matter if it's the living room. Having that space there that is a little bit more controlled and it is a little bit more safe, but having that psychological safety as well, knowing that you're going to be heard and that you're going to be listened to and that you're going to be understood and not just kicked right out the door. Now, are the vast majority of these spaces very supportive as they naturally are? No. Not really.
I do think that yes, in certain aspects we do hold space for each other. I do think that it's at lower levels, and I think it's great that you've found those spaces, and I think it's great if you have found those spaces. But again, it's a lower percentage than other genders, I believe. That's why I stay over here.